welcome back everyone to 2021's Two Old Guys
and their records.
And today's episode is about your favourite go-to albums, the album that transcends how many times you've listened to it, transcends moods. We've had such a great response with our friends sending in their favourite records that we're going to hold back on our own favourite records, right? We're going to hold back to another episode. So let's get stuck into it. Our first favourite go-to album comes from George from Earlwood, and I love George because he's an amazing bass player. And George's favourite go-to album is none other than 1984's Metallica's
Ride the Lightning.
Okay, a second album, and what an album! You know, a bit of context here, guys. The big four, Anthrax, Slayer, Metallica, and Megadeth, had released their first albums. They grabbed people's attention with this thrash metal, and they had to sort of follow it up with another album. So Ride the Lightning is a little bit different to Kill 'Em All, because Kill 'Em All, they're teenagers. They're talking about fights, they're talking about gangs. This album was an amazing second album, and I love it from the first song, Fight Fire with Fire, which is about the apocalypse, a nuclear apocalypse, all the way to the instrumental right at the end with the Call of Cthulhu. It is amazing. Now this is Metallica growing. Yes, they were teenagers for Kill 'Em All, but now they're adults. And you can see that their song compositions are a little bit different. They're moving into, mental health. They're talking about, the horrors of war. And this is where Ride the Lightning is a great album. Ride the Lightning, the song is about a guy on death row. Right? And that's where that album cover with the electric chair, the lightning, that's the motif there. So yes, you've got all that, right? And I love even the ballad, Fade to Black. I mean, weren't they taken to court over teenage suicide? They must have been taken to court over that, right? So again, you've got that. You've got Creeping Death. And we go back. Title. Great title, Creeping Death. You go back to ancient Egypt, the 10 plagues, right? Again, something very, very different. And also you've got things like For Whom the Bell Tolls. Again.
Another great title.
Another great title. With the bells.
Of course.
Right, it's got all of it, right? So I love it. And where does Metallica go after that? You know what I love about Ride the Lightning is that blueprint is replicated exactly for the following album, Master of Puppets. So you start with the thrashy song, Fight Fire with Fire becomes Battery. Then you have the title track, Ride the Lightning becomes Master of Puppets. The fourth song is Fade to Black, the ballad, which becomes Sanitarium. The last song is the Call of Cthulhu becomes Orion, the instrumental. It is replicated structurally just like Ride the Lightning. So Metallica obviously must have thought at this point, hey, we've got something really, really great here structurally. Let's replicate it with Master of Puppets. So an amazing album for the guys. And I must say, I think in Rolling Stone magazine, I think there was the top 100 metal albums, and it comes at number 11. So the legacy's there, and it's a great second album, I must say. So Metallica's Ride the Lightning, a great choice, George, I must say. Thank you very much for sending it through.
I have one from Foti from
Kanahooka.
Kanahooka. Who lives in Kanahooka? Foti does. Foti, thank you very much. This is Foti's go-to album.
My favourite album of all time, Michael Jackson Thriller, released in '82. My father bought it for my sister and I. I think he needed it mainly because he needed some English music when he used to do his Greek gigs around Sydney. You can see how much I love this album. Thrashed it as I was a kid. Still to this day, I still hear it constantly. I listen to it all the time. There's always new things that I'm listening. The band that played on this album was the musicians from the band Toto. Quincy Jones, the producer. Bruce Wadeen, the sound engineer. Sonically, this album is fantastic. Every song on this album was a hit. Even the last song, Lady of My Life, I danced to it in Greece as my wedding song, my wedding waltz. This is an original album from '82. I've even bought another one that's still sealed. I've got many copies of this. That's how much I love it. If you haven't heard this album, I suggest you stream it. Listen to the songs. Listen to what's going on. Michael Jackson himself, the legend. He was a trendsetter from back then. He was wearing masks in the 90s. Who would have thought he would have set the trend for today, 2020? Great album. This is close to my heart. As a kid, I used to thrash this album. There were so many record needles I used to break listening to this album, and my dad losing his shit because he always had to buy record needles probably once a month. So that is my favorite album. The reasons why, and I suggest stream it, listen to it, and you'll understand what I'm talking about.
Thanks for that, Foti.
Thank you, Foti. I should say that Foti is probably one of the best drummers that I know, and most definitely has the best sounding drum kit in Australia. You can mic up that drum kit, not EQ it, not compress it, not do anything to it. Just raise the fader and it sounds fantastic. But of course, a good drum kit is nothing without a good drummer. So Foti, thanks again for that. Pay attention to the sound of this album. It's no surprise that at every hi-fi show and in every hi-fi store, this record was played to death. Why? Because it sounds fantastic. What makes it sound good? Every instrument, everything there was recorded in stereo to give it a three-dimensional sound. You can see interviews with Bruce Swedien online, the recording engineer who recorded that album, and he goes into that in quite some detail. There was some controversy, obviously the world's biggest selling album, until very recently when it was overtaken by the Eagles' greatest hits.
Wow.
But we won't take that into account simply because the Eagles' greatest hits could contain recordings over a 20-year period. You can pick your best songs from a 20-year period and come up with one killer album. Michael Jackson did it in one hit in a 9-month period. They recorded 30 songs, they used only 9 songs out of the 30. Bruce Swedien did something very interesting with his recording techniques. If you listen to it on a good system, you'll see the singer is in front of the speakers, not coming out of 2 speaker boxes. And likewise with the instruments. Eddie Van Halen's guitar solo, that was pretty killer. So the recording technique there was fantastic. There was some controversy a couple of years ago. The album was remastered without Quincy Jones's sign-off, if you like. His contract specified that he has first right of refusal for remixing and remastering. They did that without him. What did they do? They crushed the hell out of the sound recording and made it louder. By doing so, they reduced the dynamic range. The dynamic range is the difference between the loudest and the softest passage in that music. So now the music was squashed, but it was louder. It just took away all the breath and air from the recording. It was remastered again later. And something rather shocking, they actually did some remixes with some current artists of the day. So if you want to buy a copy of this album, it must be the original edition, not the remaster or the remaster that came later. So the Australian edition of this album was recorded on this very lathe that you see here. This came from CBS Sony Australia. So again, Foti, thank you very much for sharing that with us. Great album, sounds fantastic if you have the original edition.
And Kanahooka is a great part of the world, right?
I don't go that far on my holidays.
Thanks, Foti. What a jam-packed episode we've had so far. We've reviewed Thriller, Michael Jackson's iconic album. We've looked at Metallica's Ride the Lightning. And our third entry from another viewer, all the way from Corrimal.
South Coast again.
South Coast again. What's happening down at the South Coast?
Loving their records.
They're loving their records. And Navs from Corrimal has sent in a very, very eclectic choice. Okay, rather than something that really is well known, he's chosen an instrumental post-metal threesome trio.
Post-metal. Who would have thought there was such a thing?
Post-metal.
Instrumental too.
Instrumental. So trio, and they're called Russian Circles. They're from St. Louis, USA. Right, and let's hear what Navs from Corrimal has to say.
G'day guys. Thanks heaps for letting me put forth an album today. You guys asked me for one of my go-to albums. I'll give you probably my favourite album by these guys, Russian Circles, Empros. These guys are, I guess they're sort of loosely coined as being a post-metal band. So instrumental, great combination of really, really heavy riffs with a bit of an ambient vibe. 3-piece, but absolutely massive sound, great stage show. And these guys are definitely my go-to if I'm ever trying to steer anyone in the direction of some good post-metal. So hope you enjoy it. Definitely check it out.
Thank you very much, Navs from Corrimal with Russian Circles and Empros. Now, listening to it, I went and had a bit of a listen to it too. I know you've raised your eyebrows, and it is. It's an instrumental album, and there's a real live sound to it. Okay, and look, I was a little bit cynical about this album because how much can you do with instrumentals, especially when you're into that rock sort of sound? But surprisingly, it was a great album. Okay, so I love songs such as 309. Okay, it's the opening track, and it's an assault of your oral sense. Okay, lots of guitars, big sound. Okay, there's another song called Metallica. Again, very, very rocky. You think it's post-metal, but mate, they've still got a bit of kick to them, you know what I mean? But my favourite song on the album, it has to be Metallica. Now, it's named after their European bus driver for their European tour.
As you do, yep.
Right?
Name the song after your bus driver, I get it, yeah.
But these guys, not only are they cool musicians, but I like that too, you know. Now, this song here it starts off jingle jangly, right? A bit of guitar work, and at the 2-minute mark, okay, the drums come in. Okay, by the 4-minute mark, it's really intense. You know, it could almost be some kind of soundtrack to some horror movie. Because it's or thriller, maybe a thriller. It's building, and by the time you get to the end, it is a very, very intense experience. You know, and what I love about it, right? They've gone through the jingly jangly, they've gone through this heavy sound, and right at the end, they've got this metal rhythm. It's almost gent, which is a reminder to all their fans that, hey, once upon a time we were a metal band. So I don't mind that too, right? So Navs, okay, very eclectic, I must say. But really, really good to listen to, especially if you're into your music, the guitar work, the bass sound, okay, and the drums, of course. So you've got people like Brian Cook on bass, you've got Mike Sullivan on guitar, and you've got Dame Tom Krantz on drums. Thank you very much, Navs. Let's go.
So we've had 3 viewers nominate their favourite go-to albums. As usual, we'll tell you if those albums are good or not. Let's take a look at the first one, Michael Jackson's Thriller.
Oh, great album!
Yes, oh, party time. The next one was Metallica's Ride the Lightning. Is this album good or not?
Whoa! Yes, great album.
And the third one was
Russian Circles and Empros.
Is this album good or not?
Whoa! Yes. Well done, Navs. Great choice.
Winner.
That's been an episode for today. Thank you very much for watching. 2 old guys.
And their records.
And we will come back with our next episode talking about our own
go-to albums.
Okay, so you're still keeping yours as a secret?
Absolutely.
I'm keeping mine as a secret too. Looking forward to seeing you again in the next episode, our favourite go-to albums.